Us again, 10 years later, and we meet again. How to start? Maybe where we are located now is a good hint. 2 hours from here, there is French location called Arcs de Bataille.
Bataille.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it is related with the First World War.
Yes.
And there are some stories from South African soldiers.
Yes.
Can you bring that story here now?
Yeah. In 1917, one of army ship, the SS Mendy, coming to France for the World War I, collided in the shores of France, Netherlands, and England, and 646 men died in that sinking, and so those that survived continued with the journey to Bataille. So, but already there were also already at that time there were already South African soldiers that were there at that time. So, over the years, because of the history of South Africa, these stories, these events were not much, commemorated, or there was no event that sort of were taking place. So there was such a very small out there information about the South African involvement, participation in the war. So in 2016, I got an invitation for the 100-year commemoration of the World War I to come to this small town where the South African native labor corps lived. So when I got the invitation, I started to think about how can a photograph be used as a medium to bring back the spirit of this of soldiers that are buried in distant land. So that's how the idea of a landscape started thinking about a landscape as a body, and how a landscape is able to hide trauma and pain. So being in those spaces, I started to think about meditation and photography, and how to sort of use that for the landscape to kind of reveal these secrets that are kind of hidden in it. Yeah.
Now I'm thinking some other works next to this one.
Yes.
Can we say, I mean, you said something very important in terms of landscape, drama, and is walking your tool? How do you use walking as an act of performing, as an act of gaze, as an act of framing a landscape?
I always think of photography as a sort of a performative also medium, that the photographs are a results of that. As a photographer who most of the time work outside of the studio, and also consider a landscape or outdoors as like my studio. So the importance of walking and looking, it's one of things that kind of I don't know. It's one of things that sort of my English is. What time is it? My English doesn't come out before 12.
It's not about the English. It's about the coffee. All right. I want to come here, especially with the decisions you made in terms of gray and green colors. How camouflage, militarist gentrification, or army are references around. And specifically, if you talk about also black and white photography as part of remembering, forgetting, how would you frame this installation for us?
The installation also thinks about mapping, instead also how we kind of put the images, so what we were just talking about right now when talk about movement. So I was kind of also like thinking about how to kind of place the images in a way that also the viewer, it's sort of, because how we look at landscape is always not flat. So I was kind of thinking about how to kind of open up the installation so that people, they can sort of think about, oh, their eyes can move like as they are kind of in the map in a way, but also the decisions on green and also of and grey. I mean, in the corner there's a photograph. I call it the Voices in Trenches. It's a photograph that came out of a roll of film when I went to this site with South African soldiers where they died. And it sort of came out with this, what I sort of think of as like how the landscape was revealing the secrets through me also. But I was thinking about my presence there, that there was this kind of recognition in a way. But if you really read closer to the photograph, it's sort of there's this kind of movement. That movement is sort of it's sort of have this kind of camouflage essence.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And final question, as a queer human mind, I'm very proud of our exhibition in terms of the core group, Yael Bartana, Erin Seyman. You really have a specific way of looking at the history, looking at the past, dealing with the archives, but also bringing very resilient forms for the future. Can we wrap it up with your engagement with South African context and the collective darkroom and the queer activism you are still dealing with, and maybe your signature piece, Country Girls, which are an ongoing project?
Yeah. I mean, this work is quite different to what kind of work that I do at home, and I think that's why somehow it sort of took some time for it to kind of see the light. Because at home I work a lot with a community and intimacy, but I sort of look at community through in a kind of biographical sense, where I kind of most of the time the communities that I work with, that I collaborate with, are communities where I'm part of. As Adnan mentioned, Country Girls, for an example, which is a series about LGBTI people outside of Johannesburg, outside of big cities. Actually, it starts from my village of Driefontein, with a friend who's inviting me to his wedding, which was a private wedding, which was even before same-sex marriage was kind of the bill was passed in South Africa. So
maybe they have seen some of it in Venice.
Sorry? Yeah, in Venice. Yeah. I presented that series but in what is the presentation in Venice is kind of is the one that thinks about building bridges, because what I'm presenting is a series of works, 3 bodies of works. One is a safe house in Lagos called the House of Alo, and also I did a residency also in Congo where I look at the idea of chosen families. So even there, and sort of now, sort of in that presentation, I was kind of thinking about this kind of how to build bridges for the foreigners in that presentation. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.